Hi everybody, and a very warm welcome to Interfaces. I am Ranjana Das, the theme champion of the University of Surrey's newest strategic research theme, Technology and Society. And I'm really delighted to be kicking off a series of 9 events, keywords in technology and society. And for each of these events, Surrey research comes together across all 3 of Surrey's faculties and on 2 occasions from outside of Surrey, where scholars talk to us about one keyword each from their diverse disciplines. And across the event, across the series from February to July, we hope to showcase some of the best of research on technology and society that we have here at the University of Surrey. So this is the first event, Interfaces, and the University of Surrey has a very long and pretty glorious history of research with data and digital technologies and their societal uses and consequences for years, even decades now. And we have some of that research here with us today. And there are constellations of researchers across the university, across its 3 faculties, where people are doing cutting edge, critical, compelling research in technology and society. So just a little bit first about the theme, Technology and Society, which has started off just a few months ago. You see there on your screen the theme's logo. The designers tell me that the little dots and the lines represent the technology of technology and society, but you see at the heart of the logo, there's people, societies, families, communities, the world in the center. And the same for the theme banner. And the theme website address is there on the banner on the bottom left. And quite a lot has already started happening for the theme. And this is Keywords. And we are very proud here at the University of Surrey with this fantastic area of events. And this is the first one, Interfaces today. But then we move on with digital rights, trust, crime, fairness, crisis, agency, risk, and well-being through till the 21st of July. So please look at the theme's website and please sign up for any of these events. And thank you very much, of course, for joining us today and highlighting 2 of these events now in red, where we bring in colleagues from outside of Surrey. On the 24th of March, Sonia Livingstone from the London School of Economics talking about digital rights. And then again on the 23rd of June, Stefania Milan from the University of Amsterdam, who's going to talk about COVID-19, datafication and the Global South. Technology and Society has been showcasing some of Surrey research throughout since its inception from before Christmas on the showcase series on the blog, and there's just a few snapshots up there from people's research across our 3 different faculties. So again, feel free to browse our showcase series, which we have running on the theme website. And we have our Twitter account, which you'll see a lot of today, TechSoc Surrey. So if you're going to tweet today's event in any way, please bear in mind we've got an event hashtag, a series hashtag indeed, TechSoc Keywords with the T, S and K capitalized, please. And of course, our Twitter account, TechSoc Surrey. So please make a note of that. And please use the chat window here to put in your questions and comments throughout as you go along. And we'll come to questions at the end, but do keep that up throughout the event. And I'm going to hand over to our fantastic chair, Itziar Castello, who's going to run the actual event for us. And this was just an introduction from me to the theme, Technology and Society. And over to you now, Itziar.
Thank you, Ranjana, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending where you are. Welcome to this fantastic seminar organized so well by Ranjana with the help of Grace. So today, as Ranjana was saying, we have very interesting topic to talk about, interfaces, and more concretely, interfaces between health and technology. So we wanted to start with this theme because, of course, it's timely, it's an important topic and might help us to better understand how to improve what we are all thinking about now, how to improve our health services through technology. So we have 3 amazing speakers today. I'll introduce briefly the speakers and then I'll let them talk for about 20 minutes. So our first speaker today is Nicola Ayers. She's speaking on behalf of Nicola Carey. Nicola Ayers is trained as a nurse, and she has worked in the Middle East and Ethiopia for many years. Her main focus has been refugee health. In 2014, Nicola completed her PhD investigating the cultural aspects of caring for the dying in Ethiopia. Nicola currently works as a palliative care advisor for the Federal Minister of Health and is a palliative care specialist for Hospice Ethiopia, a non-governmental organization. And she's also adjunct staff member at Addis Ababa University. She's also visiting lecturer at the University of Surrey here in the UK. And Nicola will speak about developing an innovative health care system for palliative care in Ethiopia, co-design and user testing of a mobile phone-based remote monitoring system. So looking forward to hear this interesting presentation, Nicola. Our second speaker, Adrian Hilton, he is the director of the Center for Vision, Speech and Signal Processing at the University of Surrey. His research spans audio and video processing, computer vision, machine learning, spatial audio, 3D, 4D video, medical image analysis, and multimedia communication system with a strong industry collaboration. Adrian's current research is focused on video-based measurement in sports, multiple camera systems in filming and TV production, and 3D video for highly realistic animation of people and faces. And Adrian will speak today about personalized media and artificial intelligence enable storytelling experiences in healthcare. And finally, our third speaker is David Frohlich, Director of Digital World Research Center at the University of Surrey, Professor of Interaction Design. He joined the center in January 2005 to establish a new research agenda on new media innovation with social and cultural benefits. His current work includes a mixture of PhD and research council projects exploring digital storytelling, personal media collections, and augmented dementia care. David will speak about changing socio-technical interfaces by design, drawing upon intersections of his work with dementia care. So again, each speaker will talk during 20 minutes approximately, and then we will open the door for questions, answers, comments. So please join the conversation. As soon as you join, we will activate, the chat is active, but we will activate it with comments, questions, and then once the speakers have finished, we will open the door for more questions, more comments, and to make this a very interactive session. So I think without further delay, I will give the floor to our first speaker. Nicola, please, if you could start when you are ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. If I could have my slides, Grace, that's great. I'm presenting from Ethiopia today, so welcome to the land of, we're known as the land of sunshine, so I'm sorry for all of you where it's snowing and cold there in the UK. So I've been asked to present on behalf of Dr. Nicola Carey, and as a group, what we did, we developed a healthcare system for palliative care in Ethiopia, and we used a co-design and did user testing to develop a palliative care app. So Dr. Nicola Carey was the lead, and then myself, and we also had Roma Maguire, who's the Professor of Digital Health and Care and Director of Research at the University of Strathclyde. We also had Ephraim from the hospice. He is the CEO, and also Dr. Catherine Royce, who was a surgeon in Arba Minch in Ethiopia. Dr. Johannes was our software tech guy, also an MD, and helped us develop the app. So we had lots of collaborators. Thank you, Grace. So Ethiopia is a large country. We have a population of over 114 million people. It's a low and middle income country. And palliative care is a holistic care for patients who have a life-threatening illness. And we provide quality of care by looking at patients from a psychological, a physical, a social and a spiritual aspects of their illness. And it was developed over 50 years ago. Modern palliative care came from Cicely Saunders in the UK when she set up St Christopher's Hospice. It's now something that it should be in every member state health continuum. But with Ethiopia, it's very much in the early stages of development. We've got just 6% of the WHO recommendations. The issues around trying to get a palliative care service in Ethiopia is this. 83% of the population live in very rural areas, and people are mainly farmers. And there's large ranges of mountains, which can also be an issue. And the issue with palliative care is that as non-communicable diseases are increasing, there is a need for it, because we also have a lack of curative services. So things like cancer services, which are ongoing and are being scaled up. We are still trying to get those services running while we can still be providing palliative care for patients. And there's also a lack of technology to support our patients and family members. So this is the background of the country. Thank you, Grace. So what was our aim? We had 2 phases to our project, but the first part was the aim was to explore views and opinions of our patients and key stakeholders, for example, doctors, nurses and software developers, about how they would feel about using a mobile phone for palliative care. So this was our study design. As I said before, we used a co-design approach based on action research. We used semi-structured interviews, and we collected data from May and June in June 2019. And we did that at Hospice Ethiopia, which is a non-governmental organisation. And then we also used a palliative care hospital hub. This is a government hospital where palliative care services have been set up. So we had 2 different sites, and interviews were conducted by Ethiopian palliative care healthcare professionals in Amharic, which is the language, one of the languages that's used here. And here you've got a picture of Ephraim asking patients about their opinions. We used purposive sampling, and we had key stakeholders as well. And as I said, we used 2 sites, Hospice Ethiopia and Yekati Medical College. Can I have the next? And there's a list of the people that we interviewed. Patients, nurses, community volunteers who are very important people, doctors, health officers are people who are between like a nurse and a doctor, who have nurses often who have had further training, and we also looked at people in finance as well. So what did we find? Well, these were the 3 themes that came. The current state of palliative care, using mobile phone technology, and the acceptability of a palliative care app. So what we found from our participants, but really there was just an amazing lack of any information for patients and family. And also the amount and type of information was very much influenced by culture. So, for example, one of the health officers said, I think there are a lot of people who need palliative care in this country, but the palliative care centres are very few. Therefore, this health sector needs to be able to work widely and rurally in that area and needs to be introduced into the community. And then one of the daycare patients said, we didn't know about palliative care. We didn't know anything about his diagnosis when my husband died. We didn't know about this care, and he didn't get any treatment. And now, thanks to God, it's possible. This was a husband and wife where the husband had already died, but the wife was getting care. So there was a real lack of information about palliative care for patients and their families. Next slide, please. When we were thinking about one of the things about finding palliative care information, there was an agreement to read the importance of information for patients and families, that both patients and families needed information. So one of the health officers said they need a health officer who can explain about their sickness very well. Next, what kind of pain they're having. For example, the people who have incurable disease, they don't even know. So there was a real issue about people knowing about their diagnosis. And there were challenges in finding the information. One of the community volunteers said they need someone who can tell them about this information. If they don't hear, they need someone to tell them about this. So getting the information was really a very key theme that came out in this first phase. Next slide, please. Then we look, one of our second theme was using mobile phone technology. How would people feel about it? And the results showed that they were seeing many benefits of using mobile phones for health. Phone ownership was very important, and phones were mainly used for calls and texts by patients, but there was a wider range of use of things like apps and social media like Telegram, WhatsApp and Facebook by other stakeholders. One of the things that we found was that even ladies coming from the village, patients coming from the village, had a mobile phone. So that was the one piece of technology that people had that we could use. So mobile phone technology helps with many things. Instead of taking the book, they can read on their mobile instead. Because a lot of people prefer to read on their phone, a lot of people spend time on the internet. That's what one doctor said. If I don't have a mobile, you wouldn't know what happened to me. But if I have a mobile, I will call and say, come quickly. The mobile has this kind of usage. So that's what one of our themes about mobile phone technology. Can I have the next slide, please? Then we looked about what would it be like if we used it for accessing health information. And what came up was that there was an actual overall positive views of the potential use of using a phone. What was interesting, there was an assumption that carers and family would use it on behalf of the patient. And one of our surprise findings came up was that it was thought to be useful for what was known as hidden patients. So one of the things we found was that for some people who wouldn't potentially want to know others to know about their diagnosis, that maybe a phone would be a way of getting information to them. So mobile phone technology is good for patients who are hiding. They can get palliative care, said one of the daycare patients. If a person doesn't have a family, it's very difficult for him to use a phone to get treatment. So the idea was that the carers potentially might use the phone for the patient if they weren't able to use it themselves. So there was this overall positive use of using a phone, and these were the three themes that we found in our first phase. Can I have the next slide, please? Then we also came across app acceptability. There was agreement to re its place for technology to support palliative care. There were some concerns about internet connectivity or lack of it. And also there was, it was suggested there needs to be really adequate training. The one thing, like, for example, one of the administrators says the main thing is for the patient that this technology has general coverage, because in our country it's behind. There needs to be a lot of things. I think it's good. There are only a few people working in palliative care. So those who need palliative care at their home, they can get support, and it can also save time and money. I think it's good. So those are the things that came up when we looked at app acceptability. Next slide, please. And one of the other things that came up was culture considerations. In Ethiopia, we have over 80 languages, and culture is, is a country full of rich culture. So this came up. The language they understand should be there. For example, if they speak English, the phone app should be in English, or if they speak Amharic, the application should be in Amharic, so they can use their own language to express what they really feel. That's what one of the nurses said. And one of the doctors says, by having social or spiritual contacts that are continuous in their life And also by discussing with their spiritual fathers, we try to solve their problems, and also not only they relieve the physical pain, but we will also advise them that they can get spiritual and psychological management. So this was an area that we also really needed to consider as we began to think about devising an app. Next slide, please. So some of the suggested uses that came out by in the research was that it could be used for self-management of symptoms, such as vomiting, breathlessness, wound care and diarrhea, for patient education regarding suitable food, having a pain scale, offering spiritual support, and also support of use of medicines. So from all this information, we then went into phase 2. And what we did was, you can see on the picture, we developed an app, which we then tested. Here you can see it in Amharic. On the actual phone, you can actually have it in English or Amharic, and we can then develop it further into other languages as we need. So what we did was, in our phase 2, the patients used the phone, and we gathered the initial thoughts on functionality, content, and product acceptability. So the app went through 3 versions during this second phase. What we did was, we had a list of symptoms that were selected, and different symptoms were added as feedback was obtained from the stakeholders. And from the feedback, we also added a diary so that patients could write down their feelings, or if they had any particular symptoms. And we also had a follow-up chart that was added during the final version. And as we developed the app, the self-assessment of the symptoms, also things like spiritual advice and medical information and wound care were added as later versions were developed due to feedback, as these were considered really important. So after the patients using the phone, they were interviewed after using the phone after a two-week period. So we had a small sample of just 10 participants just to get their feedback from what they felt about their phone. Next slide, please. So again, the interviews were performed by Hospice Ethiopian staff in Amharic. The data was analysed using framework analysis. We developed a large frame, which was then produced, and then shorter frames were done with some adjustments. And what we found was the majority of the feedback was positive about the app, and it was well accepted. When we looked at the functionality, this is what people, the participants felt. They felt it was an easy app, that it had been well created. They were able to give information when healthcare professionals are not available. So that was one thing that was felt to be really helpful, that they had this app that was available. They realised that the information addressed the patient's care holistically, which is a really important part of palliative care. And it will reach out to patients on the right time. And one of the doctors felt that it really needs to be piloted broadly. One of the doctors also felt that there was a potential cost effect, that it would be potentially cost effective and help clinicians with time management. Another thing that we, at the time when we first started this project, this was before COVID, one of the things that was very timely, that the patients felt that it was very helpful for them during the time of COVID-19. One of the health officers said it was a simple app that makes patients less tired before accessing a health centre, because often patients have to wait hours and hours before they can see a doctor. Thank you. Next slide. When we looked at the content and asked participants about what they felt about the content, they felt that the caregiver felt that they were gaining understanding that cancer is not a curse, because in Ethiopia there is some thinking that cancer and illness is caused by a curse. And so under the information and in the spiritual advice, we addressed that, and that was able to already, just by looking at those 10 participants, be able to change and help people think about their illness. People felt that it was improved on previous versions because we included wound care. Then one of the comments was it needs less writing and the font needs to be bigger. The graphics were seen as attractive and the diary was helpful to remember the symptoms. And there was also helpful non-biased spiritual support. That's what one of our caregivers mentioned. When we looked at product acceptability, one of our patients, I love this quote, one of the patients when we were interviewing her, she said, "It's like having a doctor in my pocket," because she felt confident that she had some information about her illness and about how to treat her symptoms. One of the caregivers says, "My daughter reads it to her, the patient. Now she has confidence." One of the caregivers says it's like a welcoming face. "Because of the app, people now call me Dr. K," one of the patients says. "My father got better by using the application." One of the things that we found that by this particular patient, by reading about the wound care and getting the right information, it helped one of his wounds heal because they had the advice on the app. And another caregiver said, "It helps me a lot. I sought spiritual help for my father, realizing that cancer was not a curse." Next. So with all this, we have now got a product, but of course now there's always more work to do. So these are our next steps. We're going to be looking for grants to do a full feasibility study. We're going to consider doing further work to gain key stakeholder opinions to ensure longevity. We would really like this to be embedded at the Ministry of Health level so that it can be used in all palliative care hubs and where we're working. We need to test the app in more rural areas. We've done it in an urban setting, but as we said at the very beginning, a lot of our patients are in rural areas, so we would need to test the system. We're also thinking about testing the app using a live system, and we're also going to need further versions as required as we move forward. So here is our app. This is the work that we've done, and we hope that it will be a contribution to helping palliative care coverage in Ethiopia. Thank you for listening.
Let's go now to our second speaker. So we have Adrian Hilton. Adrian, he will speak about personalized media and artificial intelligence storytelling experiences in healthcare. So Adrian, you have 20 minutes. Please, whenever you're ready, you can start. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's a real pleasure. So, despite the billing at the top, I'm actually not going to speak about healthcare specifically. I'm going to speak more about the entertainment industry and work we're doing, but it also has some translation across to other areas, as does the research in the centre. So what I want to do is talk about really some new work that we're starting. Actually, the project that this is on, it hasn't started yet. It will start officially in April this year, but I want to give some background to that on personalized media and research we're going to be doing over the next 5 years in that area. I'll first of all introduce the centre, then I'll talk about personalized media, which is the main part of the talk. And then I want to link that into the AIX Surrey activity in the network of cross-university AI activities and just give a very brief update on activities there. So first of all, the Centre for Vision, Speech and Signal Processing. For those who aren't familiar with the centre, it's a centre of excellence nationally, internationally in AI and machine perception, and ranks very highly in areas like computer vision and audio analysis worldwide, so it has very strong visibility. It was founded by Professor Joseph Kittler just over 30 years ago, and today has around 170 people, academic staff and researchers within the centre, about 90 PhD students. And it has, within it, we run a series of kind of national flagship projects funded by the UK research councils, the European Union, etc. So the centre's core is in AI and machine perception, which is the understanding of sensory data using AI. And that core expertise then goes into a variety of different areas across the centre's activities. What I'll talk about today is activities particularly related to the creative industries, but we also have activities in healthcare, activities related to data science and recognition of various forms of data and structuring data, applications in security, in particular face recognition, and applications in robotics and human-machine interaction. So that just gives a very brief snapshot of the centre. What I want to talk about is one of the projects we're just embarking on over the next 5 years in what I'm referring to as personalised media, and I'll try and explain what that's about and the direction we're going in, and also the background to what we're doing, and why, certainly for myself, I see this as an important area going forward. So the overall goal, and this is a collaboration with BBC and the University of Lancaster, and I'll explain the various different roles as we go through, but the overall goal is to use AI to personalize media experiences to the individual. And this is particularly around entertainment, you could say, or news and information, or education. But actually the research has the potential for much wider span in terms of what's happening with AI and AI's ability to interface and understand people and adapt essentially content to people. So even in the applications we just heard about, this can have some relevance in terms of, the data that you present to individuals. So essentially what personalized media is about user-centered experiences, which can adapt to the individual. So you adapt the information that you're presenting. And there's a number of reasons why this is happening now, but in particular, the confluence of advances in AI with the transfer of the media industry to a streaming industry essentially is having a profound effect on both the way we deliver and experience content, but also the things you can do with content within that. And that's where this comes from. And it's really part of feeding into a disruption that's going through the media industry at the moment. And certainly for, major broadcasters like the BBC, this is very much part of their future map in terms of where they're going. So where we are now is essentially that most media is produced in a one-size-fits-all format. And what I mean by that is that you create some content, the content is produced, and in production, essentially what happens is the content is fixed, and then that content is then streamed out to the viewer or the audience, and everyone gets the same content. So if you watch something on Netflix or Disney, everyone's getting the same content, irrespective of what their own personal interests or requirements are, or the device that they're viewing on. So whether you're viewing on a mobile phone or a large TV screen, you'll get the same content. And perhaps that's not optimal. So what we want to look at is other ways of doing that, essentially around the viewer. And this is the kind of high level picture of that around personalized media experiences that can adapt to the individual audience members. And adaptation can take various different forms, and I'll outline some of those today. But first of all, starting with interest, accessibility needs, hearing and sight requirements, maybe your location, maybe the device you're viewing on, or maybe even the time you have available to watch a program. Do you have 10 minutes or do you have an hour? The content you're going to present is different, and can that content be adapted to that time frame? So essentially the idea here is that within the research we're looking at is to take various different forms of content and build the technologies that will enable that to be delivered, shown on the right hand side, in a way that adapts to each individual user, viewer, and their requirements. And that requires a series of technological advances, as well as a series of creative advances and I suppose new ways of looking at content and creative experiences. So I just want today to go through some of this. Obviously, the main research program hasn't started, although we have a lot of background from previous projects in this area, and I'll outline one of those that's particularly relevant to this. But first of all, why would we want to personalize the content? Well, from an audience perspective, I've just outlined that everyone gets the same thing. Essentially, if you personalize content to an individual's interests, as we do with social media and something we're very used to now, the same thing can happen for mainstream media, but at the moment it's very limited. Yeah, and that will lead to improved engagement in various different ways. Obviously, accessibility requirements are very important, which might be in terms of language that that you view the program content in, or it might be in terms of impairments to sight and hearing, or indeed other impairments. It might be to do with your location, whether you're at home watching the TV, or whether you're out and about, perhaps in the car. Adapting to those things, adapting to the device that you're using, which is really one of the critical factors. What kind of screen are you looking at? And then adapting, as I said, to the time that you have available. So there's a series of drivers around audience engagement, and engaging particularly different sectors of the audience that perhaps aren't engaged with mainstream media at the moment in the way that they have been in the past. So that's one of the drivers. The other driver comes from the industry side in terms of, again, engagement of different audience demographics, whether it's in terms of culture or interest or age. There's different things you can do to the content in terms of how you present it to increase engagement. An important factor at the moment, we've seen essentially broadcasts move to an IP streaming service. That's great for the likes of Netflix and Disney and Amazon, also BBC iPlayer. Over the next decade, it's likely that all broadcast media will end up being transferred via the internet rather than as a broadcast medium as it is now. That opens up a series of possibilities in terms of what you can do to go beyond existing services. So there's commercial opportunities around targeting content and advertising. There's also benefits from personalization of the content at the moment in terms of recommendation, which is the kind of service we have today, but going beyond that to personalized services, information content, and things like that. Also, the ability to repurpose content and local content, adapted to individual or localized audiences around the world, which might be adaptation in terms of language or culture for that. So there's a series of possibilities, both of advantage to the audience and of advantage from an industry perspective. And just to give some sense of scale, really, I think, the UK media industry is about 6% of our economy, 3.2 million jobs. And the prediction is that personalization is going to be the primary driver over the next decade for growth in that industry. So that's hundreds of thousands of jobs potentially coming into this sector if we can get ahead of the curve, if you like, in terms of personalized media technology. The UK already has a very strong media industry. So I just wanted to give some examples of where this might be used in terms of different content. So first of all, in news and documentary content, really the key is the integrity of the content and the trust you have in it. And we see a lot of issues around that at the moment. So how can you personalize content but maintain the integrity? Of course, personalization in terms of news information is very important, and that's what we're used to accessing through the internet, based on interest primarily. But there's a range of other personalizations that you can have there. And it's one of the things we're going to be doing is developing intelligent ways of prioritizing information so that you maintain the integrity, but you also package it in the format that the individual audience member wants. So that's, you know, a personalization of content, particularly around factual content. On the other hand, in terms of drama, you know, there's other forms of personalization that might be important in terms of the storytelling experience. You know, adapting to accessibility requirements, adapting to the device that you're viewing, and then using things like narrative importance within the content to ensure that the elements which are important to the storytelling are accessible for the individual audience member according to their requirements. And that's something that's going to be increasingly important around film and dramatic content for entertainment, I think. Just a couple of other examples. Live events. So one of the things we're particularly seeing this at the moment, we'd like to do is have that sense of being there for anyone who watched the Six Nations rugby at the weekend. You know, watching it on a TV with a stadium with no audience in it is very removed from the atmosphere of being there. You know, can we bring that atmosphere to someone's living room, and how can we do that? Well, we've already done work in terms of spatial audio to take steps in that direction, but how can we really have a user-centered approach to both the audio and visual content? And then beyond that, how can you share that experience with friends and family through a computer mediated interface? And that's one of the things that's very, very much of interest here, and has widespread applications beyond the entertainment industry, of course. And then the other area that's also very pertinent right at the moment with homeschooling is around education and personalization of content, again, to the individual, and using intelligent storytelling, if you like, to adapt to the individual learner and their style and pace and their understanding of content. And that's something that, you know, there's a huge scope to improve on, but we're not there yet in terms of the tools we have. So really the question from my perspective is, well, how can we go about enabling personalization for mass media experiences? And one of the examples I would look at as existing technology in that space is computer games. You know, computer games are essentially personalized to the individual player. How you interact with the story depends on your actions within that story, and what you see depends on your viewpoint within the story. So there's a level of personalization already within that. Now, the key thing here is that personalization is enabled by the content essentially being represented as a set of objects, or created as a set of objects. So if you can create a computer game-like representation, then we know that you can have some level of interaction and you can adapt the content according to the individual and the interaction. The unfortunate thing about computer games is that they're manually created, though. So although the interaction is in real time, the storytelling is a very lengthy manual process, very akin to producing a feature film, for instance, for a top game. So we want to get to this object-based content, but if we're going to do this for mass media, then it has to be an efficient process. So the challenge we have is, how can we personalize captured content, video, so audio-visual content, and really how can we transform things that we capture into an object-type representation? And then having done that, how can we use that object-based content to adapt and create personalized experiences and then deliver them to the audience? So I come back to this this kind of diagram that I showed at the beginning around personalized media, and there's really three key steps that we're looking at in terms of the research that we're doing. So the first is around capture, and that's very much our expertise here at Surrey, and the transformation of video to an object-based representation. And that's really a game changer in terms of our ability to then manipulate the content and to personalize it for the individual. So we have a lot of expertise in audio and visual AI, which we're bringing to bear on those problems. And that's something we're leading from Surrey. Then you've got, having got that object-based content, of course, the production of a story and the ability to tell stories. So creation of personalized experiences, and also the ensuring that within that you maintain the integrity of the story that's being told. So we need the creative tools to be able to do that, and also the technologies around ensuring that that is used in the right way and adapts in the right way for the audience. And that's something we're collaborating on and have collaborated on with the BBC quite extensively. And then the third part of the jigsaw is around delivery to the audience member, and of course the personalization to individual audience members. And that requires use of compute resources, essentially, to render the content for a particular individual. So there, the research challenge, the technical challenge is around how can you use the network to actually deliver the content in an efficient way that doesn't increase energy use or cost a prohibitive amount to do that. So we're working with the University of Lancaster on that aspect of the project, and also that links across with our own 5G research centre here at Surrey. So those are essentially the stages, and there's AI embedded in each stage of the process, if you like, in order to get to the point where we really can personalize the content. I just wanted to kind of have a couple of slides, if I've got a few more minutes, on object-based media versus traditional media. And all I'll point out here is that traditional media has this linear format, essentially pre-produced. Object-based media starts by breaking the data that you capture up into individual objects, adding metadata to that, and then essentially transmitting that data to and then adapting according to the listening device, the viewing device, or the other requirements of the listener. So we've run over the last 5 years a project called S3A, which is around spatial audio, but using object-based media. And this is a collaboration at Surrey with Institute of Sound Recording colleagues, also again with the BBC and 2 other universities, Southampton and Salford. And this was really about understanding object-based representation and listener-centered approaches for audio and spatial audio. And there's a number of technologies that came out of that project, things like audio orchestration to create the sense of surround and spatial audio using just ad hoc consumer devices within your living room. And that's research still going on at Surrey there, and tools being released by the BBC themselves, and a range of other technologies, all built on object-based representation of the audio. So ways of increasing accessibility, of immersive experiences, etc. So in terms of the partnership, as I said, there's three core partners. The research is undertaking the basic research required to advance this, and particularly around the AI involved. But the aim is then to translate that across the project to have a real impact on the creative industries. And that's one of the challenges. It's driven by business challenges set by the BBC in this case, and a group of industry partners, but going from basic research through to impact within the media industries. So this just shows some of that map in terms of where we're planning to go over the next 10 years, really, in terms of this. The project is a 5-year collaboration. Core partners are the BBC, ourselves, and Lancaster, but then we have a cluster of other leading UK companies, particularly from the media industry, to really try and put the UK in a leading position in this space, and target global markets, obviously beyond the UK. The UK is already a leading creative industry player, but this we want to take a lead in personalized media, and that will have an impact well beyond the media industries themselves. So one of the reasons for talking about that in this forum in particular is that this personalized media really engages with some of the issues between technology and society, or technology for society, and around interfaces and media experiences. So things like trust, regulation, privacy of content, and also how we design these technologies to be of benefit to the society and benefit to the whole of society. And that's really something that's at the core of our mission with the project. How do we tailor this to be inclusive to the whole population? And this really draws on cross-university expertise and experience in these spaces, and we'd certainly like to collaborate. So I wanted to link that in briefly to the AI at Surrey for network. So I've just got 2 slides on that, and then I'll wrap up. So for those who aren't aware, AI at Surrey is a network established in 2019 to bring together essentially AI expertise across the university. There's about 30 different groups, research groups involved across the university. This is some of the high level themes, if you like, that we've linked up. And the idea is to have a way of, first of all, visibility of AI related research, but then connecting the fundamental advances in AI and AI technology with other areas of application or of understanding the development of AI and shaping the development of AI to really deliver for Surrey AI which is of benefit to society in various different application domains. And that's something I hope we can build on going forward. What I really wanted to introduce today is, for those who aren't aware of this network, then go to the website, sign up. There's a Microsoft form. If you're quick enough, there's also a QR code on this slide, or you can pick up from the video afterwards. So yeah, please sign up to the network and the mailing list. That's the first part. And then the second part I wanted to say something about is a new resource for the university, which we've just got up and running. It's just about to be launched as an open launch. And it's really a compute resource for all AI research at Surrey, all machine learning research. And it's a set of clusters running a Condor queuing system, which give access to high performance GPU compute. So the kind of compute and data processing that you need for machine learning and modern AI. So this is a resource that we've set up for everyone to use. Initially, it's been funded partly by the university and largely by CVSSP, but we hope this will become something that's useful to other researchers, and researchers across the university will feed in to this from their projects as we get new projects in. So we really want to open this as a resource for everyone to use, and we'll see how that goes, and hopefully in the longer term others will invest. But please sign up to this, and we've just today put online a Surrey Learn training course to get people up to speed on the use of the cluster, which you need to complete before using it, but it's there for everyone to use. And the email address at the bottom, if you've got any questions, that can also be found on the website. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adrian. And looking forward to hear much more about the AI Surrey, the way you are trying to include other stakeholders, the rest of the society in your projects, and many more questions that are coming from the audience there. So before we go into David, I wanted to encourage everybody to continue the conversations in the chat. We have already some very interesting questions posed that I will open for discussion after the third speaker, after David has done his presentation. but please keep posting your questions, and so we can have an interesting debate afterwards. So thank you again, Adrian, and David Frohlich is our next speaker. David will speak about changing socio-technical interfaces by design, drawing upon intersections of his work and his work with dementia care. David, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you to Ranjana for the invitation, especially to talk on the topic of interfaces, because my field is human-computer interaction. And actually, the interface between people and computers is the main subject of study. And I was intending to kind of talk about that with a recent example from work at Digital World Research Centre. But I've never really been a straight HCI person. I tend to think more of it at a systems level. And I wanted to go up a level of abstraction for this talk to a different kind of interface between technology and society itself. So in society, there's kind of an interaction that goes on between social practices of everyday life, shown in this diagram here, and digital technologies which support those. And you can study that sociologically. So looking at the black text labels on the arrows, and the bottom arrow first, you can look at the social impact of technology on society, and something the sociologists call social shaping of technology by society itself. The way people adopt or don't adopt technology, of course, shapes the way the technologists react and respond to that. But you can also intervene in this circle, and you can do that by design. And the previous two talks and my talks are both reporting changes in technology which could improve people's lives. And so the game in that circle, if you like, on the red labels here, is to look at the social context in which technologies might be used, try and identify requirements for improving practices, and also the social potential of technologies. So that requires a kind of an imagination, an ethnographic imagination, if you like, of how life could be different if only you could design a technology to nudge it or change it in some way. And I'm going to just give you an example of this from one of our projects, because this is exactly the kind of work we do at Digital World. So I say we do, socio-technical innovation on media systems. So those are systems which have some kind of media like those in the middle there, photographs, film, sounds, web, print media, and so on. Activities we've looked at include things like photography, journalism, storytelling, reading, and we've tended to track technology over the years. So we've looked at digital cameras before camera phones and smartphones, tablets, displays, speakers, augmented paper, and so on. And I'm just going to take one example and show you how this works. So the project I'm going to talk about is called Sentimental Audio Memories in Dementia Care. It's a recent one. Most of the work was done by Sarah Campbell, who's the postdoc on the project. Advisors were Mark Plumley from Surrey and Norman Alm from University of Dundee, and someone called Adam Vaughan, who was a product designer for a company called Live Better With, who both make and curate products for people with dementia. And one product in particular we were interested in was a very simple music player which could be used to assemble nostalgic or relaxing music for people with dementia. And I should say this is one study in a body of work on a topic I'm calling assistive media for health and well-being, where we've been looking at the therapeutic nature of media in different contexts. And I hope you'll see what I mean as I go through this example. Sorry, I can't seem to advance the slides here. There we go. So yeah, just back in terms of that diagram, the practice here is reminiscing, basically talking and thinking about the past, and in particular using sound recordings to trigger that or control that activity, involving the technology of audio recorders, archives, editors, and so on. Just about to describe this study on the role of sound in dementia care. The motivation for the study, it might sound like a weird thing to do, but the motivation made sense to us at the time, and I think it's proved to be a good one. So my own previous work, I've found for the strong value of sound as a memory trigger. That dates back to work at Hewlett-Packard Labs on audio photography, combining photo still image with sound, to bring the photo to life, but also to convey extra information, maybe through storytelling or music, as well as ambient sound. And more recent work with Mark Plumley on the Making Sense of Sounds project, exploring something I'm calling audiography, which is basically using sound alone as a memory trigger, just like you do with photographs, but this time with a dictaphone and some kind of enhanced player, which allows you to find sounds again, because sound, unlike photographs, is quite hard to handle. You can't browse it very easily. You have to kind of start listening through to an archive, unless it's very well annotated. In the dementia area, there is a therapy called reminiscence therapy, which involves the use of artifacts to trigger memories and conversations. Often in institutional settings. Sometimes those are physical, like printed photos or objects like memorabilia, and sometimes they're digital. So Norman Alm, who is a collaborator on the project, is involved in a digital curation system for this kind of thing. And of course, music has been used therapeutically, both for people playing music and also listening to music to control mood and also trigger memory. But there is nothing on the role of sound recordings, and everything from that previous background work suggests that sound recordings could be quite powerful in this setting. So what we did was recruit a small-scale set of people, 7 people with dementia and their family carers, shown in the table at the top there. And we visited them at home twice. So it was a home-based study in which home visit 1, we basically got to know them a little bit, spoke about their experience of dementia, but also cued them and asked them about happy and peaceful memories and the associated sounds with those, in order to come away after the visit and make some personalized playlists of sounds and soundscapes, which we then took back in a second home visit to play them, essentially to see what would happen and whether that would trigger further memories from the playback. And we had let's say a surprise immediate finding from home visit 1, where we did emotion ratings. These are self-ratings of how people felt before the interview and after, on this circumplex model of emotion, this map here. And the horizontal dimension is pleasantness or sort of happiness. Vertically, it's the level of excitement, activated or deactivated. And people were a little bit tense before the interview, but afterwards they all moved to the right, as you can see there, both people with dementia and their carers. So we found basically home visit 1 was surprisingly therapeutic in its own right. Remember, this is the one where we haven't played any sounds to them. We're just talking to them about sounds and memory. It was equally beneficial to both participants in the pair. And the pair reported having a kind of deeper level of communication with each other than usual, facilitated by the researchers and these questions. And I think that was partly because we were very symmetrical in our questioning. So we asked the carer just as much as the person with dementia about their memories and experience. And we also prevented the carer from kind of taking over the conversation, which can happen with the person with dementia in the mix because they find it difficult to talk, often to remember words and to do that kind of social interaction. So basically Home Visit 1 was very suggestive of the need for a home-based reminiscence therapy. In terms of the soundscapes, many of the reported sounds and memories were shared across the pairs, so that led to a debate within the team about whether these were personal memories or actually cultural memories that all of us share. So for example, typical generic recordings were made and then personalized to each pair. Things like beach holidays, country walks, Sunday breakfast, playing in the park, and so on. And recordings needed a little bit of introduction, or at least a title, for people to interpret them. So if I can play a little bit of one now, you'll see what I mean. So this is a Sunday breakfast. You might have heard the kettle being put on there, the scraping of chairs, the bacon sizzling and so on. Those are the kind of soundscapes we were playing for people. So when we went back and did that, we did the emotion rating again. And again, we found a positive jump. People became happier, if you like, at the end of the interview. But also you notice some of them have moved down below the horizontal there, which is an indication of calmness. So many of them became calmer as well as happier. We also carefully went through the conversations afterwards and counted the number of memories recalled, both in Home Visit 1 and Home Visit 2. And this really shows the effect of the soundscapes on the number of memories recalled. So in every case, in every pair, more memories were reported in the second case. About 10 more, which is quite a lot of memories to have triggered, in addition to the ones that might be triggered without sound. We found basically that sounds were immersive and intriguing. Participants were fairly respectful of them and didn't really talk over them. At a length of about 1 to 2 minute clips. The discussions after each of the sounds generated more memories, as I've said. And it also gave more priority to the person with dementia. So we counted the number of memories initiated by the person with dementia, and there were more in the second case after the soundscapes. The memory types were very interesting as well. Photographs depicting a Kodak moment, if you like, tend to result in episodic memories, so memories for events. These sounds resulted in memories for eras of life or routines in life, things like Sunday breakfast, as you saw, but also evacuation in the war, holidays at particular places. So in fact, places were a common memory type, if you like. And something we call somatic memories, which were indicated by people correcting the sound for us. So they would say, well, it was a bird, but it wasn't that kind of bird. Or it was a beach, but it didn't sound like that. Which really shows that people have this memory for what something sounds like. And I think that might be related to this very resilient memory for music. And I think that's a new research question for neuropsychologists to pick up from this study. Finally, we found that the stage of dementia was important to the way people reacted, but the method could cope with both early stage people with early stage dementia, where they could report memories and take part in the conversation more actively, but also in the later stages they were more passive, listening to the carer's memories and also enjoying the sounds in the moment. And just coming back to what I was saying about socio-technical interfaces, this led us to a new social potential, if you like, and a new social practice that we could create with new technology here, of basically creating and sharing what we're calling sound songs. So this is kind of a new sonic format about the length of a music track, but containing the unfolding of a soundscape representing a memory. It's a weird thing, I know, but that's kind of where this study took us to. And we realized that there is no technology for creating these kinds of soundscapes, at least no consumer technology that's easy to use. And that led us to a design session coming up with several different ideas for this, such as an ambient sound jukebox where you select categories of sounds and assemble them on a timeline. Maybe something like a Lego soundscape builder which has bricks or objects that you can align on a mat or on a table. A Foley Alexa concept where you basically do exactly what Adrian was talking about, enhanced storytelling, where the telling of a story, the telling of a memory could be listened to by an AI agent and used to then go and fetch sounds and assemble those for you, which you could then listen to and maybe critique to improve. And finally, a board game that would be a kind of sound guessing game, maybe also resulting in the generation of soundscapes and certainly the sharing of them. So you can see that this kind of work does involve the interface. In fact, all those concepts I just described, the interface is very important to the experience that you would have with them. But you also need to pay attention to this larger social practices and technologies in which these interfaces are embedded in order to change these socio-technical interfaces through design. And I'm going to stop there.
So no problem at all. So we have already some very interesting questions in the chat. So what we are going to do, we are going to take some questions from the audience now. Okay, so let's move now to the questions. Thank you for this fantastic presentation. I love this project about recording the sounds and then helping people to think about their memories and treating dementia with that. This is really fascinating. So I hope we'll see questions about that, but I wanted to open the discussion now. Not so much with a very concrete technical question that we can have later on, and there's already some of these questions in the chat, so maybe then we can follow on them later, or each of you can also follow up, right? But I wanted to start this more general discussion with the three of you with a question to each of you. Is the same question, but I would like you to answer this question about the potential risks, because you and this is a question that comes from me because I have this tendency of thinking about the dark side, because my own research is about the social the business responsibilities and the dark side of digitalization. But I also saw that Carla Bonina has put this question on the chat, so I think this is very relevant. You all focus on the opportunities, the potentials, the benefits, and this is great how the technology is interfacing between doctors and patients, media providers and users, creating sound songs, as David explained, in order to create memories. But all these things are very sensitive, right? Palliative cares, media preference and needs, storytelling that constitutes discourses and at the end truth in a way, right? Or the truth that people have in their mind, or dementia care. So I wanted to ask you this question: what are the dark sides, the potential risk, the social harms of focusing in these interfaces and maybe removing the human? Who wants to start? Maybe David, do you want to start, and then we will go to the others?
Yeah, sure. That's a very interesting question, especially for the study I just reported, because there is a debate in the field about whether you should try and avoid the triggering of negative memories. So in a reminiscing context like this, you're kind of trying to get people to think about happy times and good memories. But of course, whenever you do cause people to think about the past, they may have negative memories about the past. And I guess both Sarah and I and colleagues on the project are of a view that that's not necessarily a bad thing. So actually, I can say that in all my career, some of the most powerful studies I've done and technologies I've deployed are the ones that have made people cry. And making someone cry is something that probably wouldn't get through an ethics committee very easily. But it's actually one of the most special, things that could happen in a study in some ways, especially a study like this. And, for that reason, we did count positive and negative memories in the study. And there were some negative ones, people who'd lost loved ones, or were reminded of bad things that had happened. So I think you have to make a judgment as a researcher about whether the negative things, first of all, whether the things you're introducing are going to cause negative effects, and then also further step, whether those negative effects, certainly in this case, are just part and parcel of being human, and shouldn't be blocked.
That's very interesting. What about, Nicola, what about introducing an app where before it was only a doctor, and removing the human from this interaction? Nicola, I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. Okay. We're not wanting to really remove the doctor or the healthcare professional from the app. What we're trying to do is to use it as a support, because in palliative care we always say that we're high touch, low tech. Really, that's in one of the things that that people say about palliative care. But when you've got a huge population and there is very, very little information, that's one of the reasons why using an app would be useful. I think one of the potential risks is that making sure that the app coverage and the actual palliative care system, the palliative care coverage in the country, run so that one doesn't outweigh the other, so that you have people being able to use an app, but then not potentially being able to access like morphine and drugs and those systems. So it's making sure that the systems grow together and in unity, and that involves collaboration with making sure it's embedded at the Ministry of Health and in the specific health systems, that it's not just on its own. So I think that would be potentially a risk, and that's something that we're going to need to explore as we do further research.
Fantastic. Very much. Adrian, what about the potential risks that you see in these interfaces in mass media?
Sure. I think it's a great question, first of all. I mean, and it's central to the way we need to think about these things. I mean, the way I view this is that, people are right at the center of this, all of these applications and technologies. AI has a huge power to do things for us. But if it's used in the wrong way, then it's a technology like many others that could be misused. So there's definitely a risk there, and I think it's really important to recognise that risk. So, the mitigation, of course, is to design systems with people involved and thinking of the people at the start and all the way through, I would say, and that requires, and one of the issues we have in AI technology at the moment, it requires inclusion within and diversity within the people who are designing the technologies. And as everywhere in technology, it's not balanced with the population at large. So, this is one of the areas that certainly we need to collaborate on to make sure we are considering things, and it's issues that go beyond the technology. The other thing I would say is, and I was interested in what David was saying, really, that around the ethics of making people cry. Well, if you look at the media industry, and entertainment, that's exactly what those things are trying to do. They're trying to provoke your emotions. You know, storytelling is one of the most powerful ways of communication we have. And if you get it right, then it's a wonderful thing. Of course, you can get it wrong as well. And, you know, we see that with the fake news and all of that kind of thing at the moment that's happening. So, you know, these are powerful technologies in the hands of people and in the hands of, you know, machines, I would say. And we need to think through the issues in terms of how we design systems to be safe. One thing I would say around the kind of things I was talking about, personalized media, they're powerful tools, but the way I see that evolving is very much to involve the storyteller in the process and to ensure that the intent of the storyteller is preserved in what's presented at the end. And that's one of the key things we have to do in the design. So what I mean by that is essentially that, you know, if you produce a film, then we're very used to the director's intent being embedded in the final experience. In a computer game, it's a bit different because it's dynamic, but still you have to embed that intent. You know, you don't want it to be abused, and we have to learn to do the same things with new forms of storytelling, which is really personalized media and all of those things, just as we have to with social media, where we haven't perhaps got all the constraints on that we'd like, but you know, those things as well. So I think it's a very good question.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because you all have very strong collaborations with partners. I hear Adrian collaborating with the BBC, but also their media providers. I understand that Nicola is also very closely collaborating with the government, with health service providers, and also David, of course. And these partners have their own stakes, goals, imperatives, and sometimes, and I guess this is the case of the research also, that can be somehow commercialized, and probably this is more the case of Adrian, but also you, David, and the whole process of storytelling and putting music in the stories, and also commercializing apps for healthcare. This is something that is very much in growing in the industry now. And so how do we as researchers try to balance the societal needs and the interest for research with these other outcomes that might be not so socially oriented? How do you do that in your projects, if I may ask? Nicola, or David, sorry.
Yeah, I can start again. I mean, I think it's fantastic that we all are working with partners who can take the results of research and translate them into real world products or processes. I think, you know, the impact agenda, let's say, in universities might be fairly recent, but whenever you're involved in developing technologies, you always want to see them out there. You always want to make them in order to improve other people's lives. I think almost by definition, if you're working on new technology, it would be crazy not to want that technology to go somewhere. And you know, these partners are our allies in that, because the university itself is never going to bring out the kind of products that we're all working on. But so we need these partners to do that, and they need us actually, because as Adrian said, you have to work with end users, you have to do research on what's needed, you have to see if it works, and so on. So in a way, we are an R&D arm for the companies that we work with in some ways. That's my view.
Yeah, I would agree with David very much that it's really helpful to have very, very strong partnerships, that you can discuss these things as they come up and deal with them. But ultimately, it is about helping and supporting and changing. And I think as long as the relationships are strong and that you have like sort of where you can see it going, it's also help for them to take that forward. And it's really interesting for me to see how three very different projects have such strong partnerships and how the effect that has. And I think that's absolutely essential from the very beginning.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. I can see that you're also discussing this with Carla from the audience. So, Adrian, maybe if you want to say something about this, and maybe Carla, if you want to jump in after Adrian.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from my perspective, I think working with collaborators is absolutely essential. I was just thinking about the question. You know, one thing certainly with the partners I've worked with, you know, they're often driving this agenda around ethics. You know, it may be surprising the amount of work actually that's going on from the big multinationals, technology internationals, around trying to ensure that AI is developed in the right way. And that's not necessarily the kind of public face you see from, I don't know, let's take Facebook, for instance, as one of those multinationals, but definitely there's a real interest in getting these things right. I mean, I think from my side, and I think, you know, we probably have an obligation as researchers to try and work with companies that are pointing in the right direction ethically, in terms of, you know, they're not just there for generating profit, as it were, at all cost. And I think, you know, really industry, some of the companies we work with, some in that set I showed, are really trying to lead on, you know, we're entering an era where essentially we'll be able to generate media synthetically from a machine, and you won't know the difference from things that you captured with a camera. You know, how long that will take, I don't know, but that's the era we're entering. So doing that in a way that's ethical and has trust is really important for media providers, because otherwise you're just going to switch off eventually, or, you know, follow things that, you know, you really shouldn't be following. I mean, we're already seeing that, but you know, these questions are very important, and I think, you know, we need to have our eyes open and engage with people who are experts in those areas. Yeah.
Thank you. Carla, do you want to unmute yourself and follow up, since you are also participating in the chat with this type of questions?
Great. Also, would really love to follow up, and it's something that we normally speak also with Mark Plumley as well in other projects. It's fascinating, and I know, you know, also collaborating with lots of engineers in the past and for the projects on digital social innovation. To me, it's really nice to see that this is becoming part of their agendas. But of course, you know, something that I'm looking at the moment, and you see it very much, the problems of target advertisement, and that was what prompted my question. To what extent, you know, using the user preferences, then you're not contributing to more polarization. I think integrity is a very important trait, but there are other things happening. I was also fascinated by what you both say, Nicola, and also David, regarding, you know, the other medical aspects or bad memories. So these are by all means very important questions that are at the core of my also multidisciplinary collaborations, because I don't think there is another way to actually tackle what's happening. A case I'm looking at the moment in particular, and of course would love to follow up more, you know, offline when convenient, has to do with justice and the use of artificial intelligence, for example, to open up records that are many times criminal. So there is this situation that, you know, Google has already very good algorithms to enable you to do that. But do we want to keep feeding that algorithm with lots of personal data, or we really need indigenous innovation that can also be collaborative and open to scrutiny, you know, for important matters that have to do with justice. So these are examples that I think, you know, are more and more coming, and we're going to see much more of this, simply because, you know, big techs are at the eye of the storm at the moment with these very important questions. So that's what I wanted to say, and thank you so much for the opportunity to jump in.
Thank you so much, Carla. Adrian, maybe you want to follow up on that issue?
Yeah, lots of things to discuss there. I mean, I think, you know, the big techs have this in their hands at the moment, and you know, we need to do what we can to engage with those technology companies, to drive agendas that those companies have. But you know, it's not necessarily the case that those things will win. But we you know, I think for all of us, the technology developers on our side, I mean, increasingly, I think as AI advances very rapidly, you know, building in training for our PhDs as they come through, for our researchers, and making sure they have the support to make the right decisions is important. You know, things like that we can do, of course.
And just a quick qualifier on that, I'm also saying all this from the perspective of the Global South. So, you know, I'm also taking part in, you know, training people there, and it's part of my impact work as well, because you also wonder what happened with the billions that are, you know, perhaps less prone to be technically, you know, thought about these tools. So you're also increasing the device, you know, across the globe. So by all means, you know, training and awareness and you know, responsibility very much at the core of the agenda that I'm looking, you know, at the moment on digital platforms for development. So great work.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you very much. So David or Nicola, do you want to jump in and say something more about this? David?
I mean, I was just going to mention GDPR again, because I think that is a step in the right direction in terms of sort of minimizing the circulation of personal data, maybe, or restricting it a bit more than it has been restricted. And Adrian's right, so the typical example is social media systems where you've got all this user-generated content that you're, from a user point of view, you're usually sharing it with people you know. You may be trying to attract, maybe Twitter is an example of that, people you don't know. But you tend not to think about the range of uses it's put to or where it's going, and you don't really know what's happening to it. And I think, you know, the legislation is only just catching up with this situation. And when we do any of these studies, as you know, Adrian and Nicola will attest, we have to kind of abide by GDPR regulations. We have to be careful what we do with our data. In my case, you know, this is very sensitive personal data, people's memories and stories. We can't send those anywhere, and that's a good thing. So GDPR's, yeah, generally a good step forward, I think.
Nicola, what about your data, your case?
I think this is, I mean, in a different setting. I think obviously, like with David, our patients' data is obviously very sensitive, and confidentiality, and making sure that in the technology that is set up from the beginning, and that, you know, like with access, and there, when you're working in different countries, there's also, you know, obviously different rules, and making sure that those are all covered as we move forward. So I think it's really important when you're dealing with patient data to have it right from the beginning, discussed and thought through.
I have a follow-up question from something that you mentioned, that it's that all these new technologies, especially led by artificial intelligence, are going to be able to do the things that we used to do. Like Adrian just said, that stories are going to be told by machines, and maybe not very far from now. Also, maybe in the case of Nicola, and we are seeing this more and more, especially through the pandemic, like we are getting information through apps and through other artificial intelligence-led automated applications. And I want to reflect about, so how, not so much how do we teach that to our current students, because obviously this is something that we are all involved, but I was thinking about that is, and for me, the question that it's very interesting now is like, if many things are going to be done through artificial intelligence in the future, what do we teach humans our students in the future that it's different, that it's something unique that they can do. And I guess this relates very much to dementia and the cure of it, or maybe the personal touch of being a patient and a doctor. I don't know. What is your view? What is the unique capability that humans will have that we need to teach our students?
I think in palliative care, one of the things that we offer, especially when we're looking at end of life, is that we offer our patients our presence, and we offer the family that support. Our app is called ISO, which means actually I'm with you, but the app can only be there to a certain extent. But as human beings, our presence and with both the patient and the family, especially at the end of life, is something that is very, very profound. So that is something that I think technology can't really sort of take away, you know, it can't actually replicate. So, but I think what's interesting is you can have something like palliative care that is a very personal care and still use technology as long as it's used in its right place. And that's what we need to get right, you know, to try and make sure that the technology supports us in what we're doing, but doesn't take over.
Thank you. David.
I love that, Nicola. So it's kind of compassion and human presence. So I think teaching compassion, teaching empathy, teaching creativity, those are all things which are going to be difficult or impossible for any artificial intelligence to reproduce. But I do think we're going to have to be very flexible, because AI is probably going to encroach on more areas than we expect even now, and threaten jobs and so on. So I think we're going to have to keep it in check to some extent, and also react to it. I'm not sure we can forecast now what we should be teaching our students, but we should be flexible.
Adrian, if computers are going to make the stories, I teach to my entrepreneurship students.
Maybe I overstated the case. I think, you know, we're a long way from computers having human experience and human level of understanding of what it is to be human. I think, you know, computers in many ways will remove a lot of or AI will remove a lot of the tedious work that humans have to do in, say, producing a film. You know, it's like an 18th century industry. If you go into a film studio with lots of people basically manipulating pixels on the screen, you know, it's a very labor intensive, very non-creative task in the end, a lot of the time. You know, to me, within the creative industries, what these methods of automation and AI do is open up greater creative potential, and there's always a human at the center of that, you know, as the storyteller, as the, you know, the narrative driver. That's not to say that we won't have, as we do with fake videos, ways of manipulating things. I think that's absolutely true. You know, we'll have powerful tools, but I think there's a lot to be. We're a long way from removing humans from any of these things, you know, and, you know, that human contact is, of course, something we want, whether it's in care or it's in communication or anything else, you know, so, you know, things will shift, no doubt. And I think there were some questions about jobs and things like that. Things will shift, but, you know, to some extent, if the UK gets it right, then it's a high-tech industry. We stand to gain from that, where actually, you know, there has been a transfer of jobs overseas because of their relatively low-skilled, labor-intensive things. You know, we've seen that with our manufacturing industries, for instance. So, you know, we really need to be at the cutting edge of the technology to drive this, and that's where jobs will come from, with slightly different skill sets, but still involving people very much, I think.
Fantastic, thank you. So at least I'm having some hope now that not everything will be done by these artificial intelligence techniques. Thank you so much. I think we need to wrap up now. There are some very interesting questions in the chat. So if maybe after we finish, you can dedicate 2 or 3 minutes, or maybe the people that have been putting the questions. Thank you so much for everybody participating. Can also contact David, Adrian, and Nicola for follow-up questions. This is the whole purpose, to create this dialogue. And I'm going to pass the floor to Ranjana, who's going to close the event. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. We had about 70 people join us for the first hour, and that was fantastic, where we had our 3 excellent papers showing us a glimpse into Surrey's fabulous research. And I think the papers all did that and so much more. For all of you who came today, Keywords starts today with interfaces, but Keywords goes on till the 21st of July, and we have 9 keywords, the first of which was interfaces. So please visit the theme's website and sign up for the rest of the 8 events, each themed on 1 keyword. And the next one is on the 24th of March on children's digital rights, where we have our guest speaker, Sonia Livingstone from the London School of Economics. And sign-ups are accumulating fast for that. And thank you very much for coming today, and do get in touch with the speakers with questions, and of course get in touch with me to know more about the theme. And if you are in the University of Surrey, please get in touch with me to join our ever-growing theme here at the university. And I'll circulate the recording to all of you on social media and also on the theme website very soon. So thank you once again, speakers, and see you all soon.